For as long as anyone could remember, one rule had kept the galaxy from collapsing into chaos. It was not written in any law books, not painted on the walls of every planet, and yet it was known to every species that roamed the stars. That rule was simple yet absolute. Never under any circumstances harm a human child. It was a rule born out of fear, respect, and a long memory of past mistakes. Humans were a small race, fragile-looking and often underestimated, but the galaxy had learned the hard way that underestimating them was deadly. Centuries ago, a misunderstanding had led to a human colony being attacked, and the retaliation that followed had wiped out entire star systems. It was a lesson burned into the memory of every species. Human children were untouchable. The Galactic Council, the governing body that oversaw thousands of civilizations and countless planets, had codified this lesson into the first rule of the galaxy. It was more than law. It was a survival instinct that every civilization accepted. The rule wasn't just about morality, it was about strategy. Attack a human child and the consequences were unimaginable. Earth and its allies had the power, knowledge, and fleets to strike back like no other. Civilizations had learned to respect the fragility of children, knowing that harming them would bring an unstoppable force upon them. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, discussions about trade, territory, and disputes between alien races were constant, but the rule regarding human children was rarely debated. It was assumed like gravity that it simply existed. Representatives of the Valtor Empire, a proud and ancient race, often glanced at human delegates with barely concealed disdain. They saw humans as weak, as fragile, and perhaps even too cautious for the galaxy's fast pace. Yet even the Valtor had to obey the rule, at least on the surface. They smiled politely, nodded during council meetings, and never crossed the line. The rule had kept a fragile peace for generations. But over time, the story of the human children transformed in the minds of younger species and younger leaders. Where once there had been fear and respect, curiosity turned into arrogance. Some began to whisper that humans were exaggerating their strength. Others claimed that the rule made the galaxy weak, that humans had grown comfortable behind their shields and fleets. A few of the boldest even joked that the first rule was a relic of the past, a tale designed to frighten foolish alien races. These whispers never reached the general public, but inside the council halls they began to form seeds of rebellion. And as with any seed, if left unchecked, it would grow into a dangerous tree. Meanwhile, on the many planets and stations spread across the galaxy, humans went about their lives with a strange mixture of innocence and awareness. Children played in the streets of floating cities, their laughter echoing across zero-gravity courtyards. On distant colonies, children learned about star maps, mathematics, and the histories of alien civilizations. Their parents, diplomats, scientists, or engineers always reminded them quietly about the first rule. Humans knew that their children were symbols of power, that even the smallest human could represent the wrath of an entire civilization, and yet the children themselves mostly lived without fear. They had never seen the full force of human retaliation, only heard stories from history. To them, the galaxy seemed big, bright, and full of adventure. Despite this, there was tension, subtle and often invisible. Humans had built fleets, trained officers, and created surveillance networks, but they did not flaunt their strength. It was a quiet kind of power, one that demanded respect without needing to shout. Every alien species knew it was safer to maintain peace, to honor the first rule. And yet, the arrogance of the young council members slowly began to poke at that balance. Some thought, perhaps privately, that humans would not respond instantly if tested. Others considered that the first rule might be a bluff, an old story repeated so often that it had lost its bite. In the council halls, a debate was brewing. A group of influential leaders argued that the galaxy could no longer be held back by fear of humans. They claimed that humans had grown complacent, that their fleets were spread thin across trade routes and colonies. "If we strike first, we can show the galaxy who is truly in charge," one of them said confidently. Their words were sharp, almost cutting, but met with cautious nods. The idea of attacking a human child was so shocking that most delegates paused, yet the notion had entered their minds. It was the first time in generations that such thoughts had even been entertained. Meanwhile, back on human colonies, life carried on as normal. Schools taught both the human history of resilience and the necessity of caution. Children like Adam Cole, a curious boy with a love for machines and adventure, roamed freely on the stations, fixing small robots, exploring corridors, and asking endless questions about the stars. His little sister Lily followed him everywhere, always trying to keep up. Their parents reminded them to stay within the safe zones of the station, to avoid crowded council areas or dangerous docking bays. Yet for Adam and Lily, the galaxy was a playground, and the first rule was something abstract, a story they had been told to respect, but never truly feared. Unseen, far from the laughter of children, the seeds of disaster were quietly being planted. The Valtor leaders, influenced by the whispers of young counselors, began to consider the impossible, breaking the first rule. They justified their thoughts with logic twisted into arrogance. Humanity was powerful, yes, but it was spread across the stars. Could they really respond in time to punish an isolated station? Could a single attack send shockwaves enough to intimidate the humans into submission? For some, these questions were not moral dilemmas but challenges, a test of cunning and nerve. And so, as the galaxy spun in silence, the story of the first rule began to unravel. It had survived countless wars, decades of uneasy alliances, and generations of caution. It had kept billions of children safe, had stopped countless conflicts before they began, and had earned humanity the quiet respect of the entire universe. But rules, no matter how ancient or well-remembered, are only as strong as the fear and respect that enforce them. And in the glittering halls of the Galactic Council, fear had begun to fade, replaced by curiosity, ambition, and arrogance. The stage was set, though no one yet realized it. The first ripple of tragedy had not yet fallen, but the calm before the storm carried a strange tension. Somewhere a plan was being drawn. Somewhere, the unthinkable was being whispered. The rule that had kept the galaxy peaceful for generations was about to be broken. And in that instant, the galaxy would learn what humanity had always known. Human children were not just innocent lives. They were living symbols of a power that no one could challenge without paying the ultimate price. Even as children laughed in zero-gravity courtyards and humans went about their ordinary lives, the shadow of the future crept closer. What had been a tale of caution and respect was about to collide with ambition and pride. The first rule of the galaxy, the rule that no one had ever dared to break, would be tested in ways no one could have predicted. And when it did, the universe itself would tremble, for it would see why that rule had existed in the first place, and why no one should ever, ever forget it. Vega Station was one of the busiest hubs in the galaxy, a floating city that hovered between human and alien territories. Ships from hundreds of worlds docked daily, bringing traders, diplomats, and travelers from every corner of the stars. Despite its constant activity, Vega Station had always been considered safe for humans, especially children. Parents walked their kids through crowded corridors without fear. Teachers led their students in lessons on science, mathematics, and interstellar history, and everyone trusted that the first rule of the galaxy would protect them. Life on Vega Station was orderly, peaceful, and filled with small moments of joy. Among the children living on the station, Adam Cole stood out. He was 12, small for his age, but clever beyond measure. Machines fascinated him, especially alien devices that no human had ever seen before. While most kids played holodeck games or floated in zero-gravity parks, Adam spent hours in the station's workshop, tinkering with gadgets and learning the intricacies of alien engineering. His curiosity was infectious, and soon other children gathered around him, eager to learn, eager to explore. Among them was his little sister Lily, a spirited 8-year-old who refused to stay behind. Wherever Adam went, Lily followed, asking endless questions, laughing, and occasionally causing a minor accident in the workshop. Despite her mischief, everyone adored her, and she had the kind of smile that could melt the hardest alien heart. The children's parents were cautious but calm. They knew the history, they remembered the old wars, and they understood the significance of the first rule. But they also knew that constant fear would ruin childhood. So, while they instructed Adam and Lily to stay close to safe zones, to never wander near alien security areas, and to follow the teacher's guidance, they also encouraged their children to explore, learn, and make friends with aliens from other species. Many of the teachers were human, but several were aliens who had spent decades working on Vega Station. Together, they created an environment where curiosity thrived and trust crossed species lines. One ordinary morning, as Adam was showing a group of younger children how to fix a broken drone, an unusual announcement came over the station's loudspeakers. Attention all residents of Vega Station. The Galactic Council has dispatched a special patrol from the Valtor Empire for inspection. All inhabitants are requested to comply with standard safety protocols. The voice was calm, almost polite, but the atmosphere in the station shifted immediately. Parents whispered nervously. Teachers glanced at one another. Children sensed the tension but didn't fully understand it. Adam's mother held Lily close, her eyes scanning the skies outside the docking bays for any unusual ships. The patrol arrived not long after, their ship sleek and black with an intimidating design that made even the bravest officers uneasy. The Valtor soldiers disembarked, tall, muscular, and carrying weapons that gleamed under the station's artificial lights. Their leader, Commander Zorath, had a reputation that preceded him. Strict, ambitious, and rumored to have broken rules on several smaller worlds, though never the first rule. To the humans on Vega Station, the patrol's arrival felt unsettling, but they reminded themselves that no one dared break the law regarding children. That law had protected them for generations. The inspection began with typical procedures, checking trade goods, reviewing security protocols, and observing the flow of residents through the station. At first, the Valtor troops were polite, even friendly, though their eyes were sharp and calculating. They spoke little, but every glance seemed to measure, evaluate, and weigh each human child. Adam, curious as ever, approached one of the soldiers, offering to show him a newly repaired drone. To his surprise, the soldier accepted. The alien's expression softened as he examined the small machine, fascinated by Adam's ingenuity. The children laughed, delighted that a real Valtor soldier had smiled at them. Parents breathed a sigh of relief, believing the first rule was still intact, that their children were safe. But behind the smiles, whispers of arrogance and impatience were growing. Commander Zorath had received secret instructions from the higher-ups in the Galactic Council, instructions that few outside the Council knew. Test the humans, the message had said. Show them that rules are flexible. Begin with their stations. Begin with their children if necessary. The words were shocking, yet Zorath justified them in his mind. He told himself it was a demonstration of strength, a warning to humanity that the galaxy would no longer be dictated by old fears. To the Valtor soldiers, it wasn't murder. It was strategy. To the humans on Vega Station, it would become horror. Adam didn't notice the tension at first. He was busy explaining gears and circuits to a small group of curious students when he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw Commander Zorath, who nodded toward the docking bay. "I would like to see the children's recreation area," the commander said. Adam's stomach twisted with unease. This request felt different, heavier. He looked at Lily, who held his hand tightly, and at the group of smaller children laughing and floating in zero gravity. He nodded reluctantly and led the way. When they entered the recreation area, the Valtor soldiers stopped, observing every child, every movement, every interaction. Some soldiers appeared impressed, others impatient. For a moment it seemed like nothing would happen, that the first rule, as it always had, would protect them. Teachers stepped forward politely, guiding the children to safety zones, keeping calm as best they could. But Adam sensed something was wrong. He saw the way Zorath's eyes lingered on Lily, on the smaller, more vulnerable children, not with curiosity but with intent. Then it began. The first shock of the attack was subtle, almost unnoticeable at first. A controlled detonation, a flash, a warning shot fired near the edge of the recreation area. The children screamed, scattering in every direction. Parents and teachers shouted, trying to shield them. But the soldiers moved faster, trained for chaos. Adam grabbed Lily and ran toward the nearest emergency exit, but Zorath blocked the way, his presence enormous, commanding. The children's laughter vanished, replaced by fear that no one had felt in decades. The first rule, the safety they had always trusted, had been broken. In minutes, Vega Station transformed from a peaceful hub of learning and friendship into a battlefield. The Valtor soldiers, following orders, aimed to intimidate, to test, and to demonstrate a brutal point. Teachers formed barriers with their bodies, trying to protect students, while parents called for security reinforcement that was still hours away from arrival. Adam, clutching Lily tightly, ducked behind consoles, dodging laser fire that whizzed dangerously close. The children's innocence collided violently with the harsh reality of a galaxy that could, and now had, decided to break its most sacred law. In those terrifying moments, bonds were revealed. Aliens who had worked alongside humans for decades took up arms, shielding the children, confronting the Valtor with courage that surprised even the humans. Even some of the younger Valtor soldiers hesitated, unwilling to strike the children while their leaders barked orders, frustrated at the disobedience. Adam saw children crying, shaking, but also saw bravery. A small human girl helping a smaller alien child escape a dangerous corridor. A boy risking his safety to pull his friend behind a protective wall. These moments were fleeting, but they marked a turning point. The attack was not just about fear. It was about proving that even in the darkest moment, children could inspire courage. By the time the first human reinforcements were alerted, the message had already spread beyond Vega Station. Every system and communication range received live footage of children being threatened, of laughter turning to screams. Billions of eyes across the galaxy witnessed the breaking of the first rule, and the reactions were immediate and intense. Humans everywhere understood the meaning. The unthinkable had happened. Vega Station, a place once thought untouchable, had become the spark for what would soon ignite a larger conflict. Adam, holding Lily as the chaos raged around him, realized something that would stay with him forever. The first rule had been broken and nothing would ever be the same. The world of safety, of trust, of peaceful coexistence had vanished in a moment of arrogance. But even in fear, Adam understood the lesson humans had learned long ago. That innocence, bravery, and the lives of children were not to be trifled with. Somewhere, deep in the galaxy, decisions were being made that would soon unleash the full power of humanity, and Vega Station's children were at the very heart of that storm. The attack on Vega Station began as a ripple, a small disturbance in a world that had always been calm. But within minutes, that ripple became a tidal wave of fear, confusion, and chaos. The Valtor soldiers had arrived under the guise of inspection, yet their intentions had been far darker. Orders from the higher-ups in the Galactic Council had been clear. Test the humans, break their complacency, and demonstrate that no rule was absolute. What no one had expected was how quickly the carefully constructed piece of Vega Station would shatter. Adam Cole's world, once filled with laughter, curiosity, and exploration, changed in the span of a few terrifying seconds. He had been showing younger children how to repair a drone when the first warning shot fired across the corridor. The laser beam sizzled through the air, cutting a narrow path dangerously close to the children. Panic erupted. Children screamed, and teachers instinctively moved to protect them, forming human shields between the students and the soldiers. Parents grabbed their children, shouting orders that sounded almost meaningless in the chaos. Adam's heart pounded in his chest as he pulled Lily close, dragging her toward the nearest exit. The Valtor soldiers advanced with ruthless precision. Every movement was calculated, every action designed to spread fear. They weren't just attacking to harm, they were sending a message. Adam saw children stumble, trip over each other, and freeze in terror as the soldiers swept through the corridors. His mind raced for solutions, but the situation was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Vega Station had been a sanctuary, a place where human children could roam safely among alien friends. Now it had become a battlefield, and the very existence of the first rule, the rule that had kept them safe for generations, was being torn apart. Lily clung to Adam, trembling. "Adam, they're going to hurt us," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Adam's stomach knotted. He wanted to say everything would be fine, but he knew the truth. The first rule had failed them. He couldn't remember ever feeling so helpless. The corridors, once bright and filled with laughter, now echoed with screams, blaster fire, and the hurried footsteps of soldiers and fleeing children. Every second stretched into eternity. Teachers and alien allies on the station acted with remarkable bravery. A human teacher named Marla, who had been supervising a group of younger children, threw herself over them as a blast passed dangerously close. An alien engineer whose species was known for fear of human wrath stood his ground, physically shielding children from the soldiers. Even in the face of overwhelming power, courage surfaced in unexpected ways. The children witnessed acts of heroism that would stay with them forever, proving that even when innocence is threatened, bravery can arise from fear. Adam's mind raced for an escape. He remembered the emergency evacuation routes drilled into every student, but the chaos had blocked several paths. Smoke filled the hallways, alarms blared, and red lights flashed, Soldiers shouted in their harsh, guttural language, a sound that made the hair on Adam's neck stand on end. Yet he refused to give up. Clutching Lily's hand, he led a small group of children down an alternate corridor he had explored during a previous maintenance run. Every turn, every shadow brought both hope and danger. Then it happened, the moment that would change the galaxy forever. One of the Valtor soldiers, frustrated by the children's escape, raised his weapon and fired. The beam struck a young human boy who had frozen in fear, cutting across the hallway. The sound was deafening, the impact horrifying. Children screamed, teachers shouted, and parents ran forward in disbelief. Adam felt his stomach drop as he saw the boy fall to the floor, bleeding and motionless. This single act shattered the illusion of safety. The first rule, the rule that had protected generations of humans, had been broken. The scene was broadcast across the galaxy in real time. Vega Station had communication systems capable of sending emergency signals instantly, and the footage captured every terrifying second. Children crying, teachers shielding them, parents shouting, and soldiers advancing without hesitation. Billions of beings across thousands of systems watched as the sacred law protecting human children was violated. For the first time in decades, the galaxy saw that no one, not even humans, was untouchable. As chaos reigned, Adam acted instinctively. He grabbed Lily and a few smaller children, ducking behind consoles and moving through maintenance tunnels that connected different sections of the station. Every corner they turned revealed new dangers, more soldiers, falling debris, and smoke that made breathing difficult. His mind focused entirely on one mission: keep the children alive. He shouted encouragement to the others, even though he was terrified himself. His courage became their anchor, a small spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. Teachers worked tirelessly alongside Adam. Marla, bleeding from a minor wound, coordinated evacuation routes while fending off soldiers with whatever tools she could find. Alien allies, often thought timid in the presence of humans, displayed a loyalty that surprised even Adam. One large alien, whose skin shimmered like liquid metal, stood in the doorway of a corridor, holding off a group of Valtor soldiers long enough for the children to escape. Every act of bravery added to a growing sense of unity, proving that even in the face of terror, cooperation and courage could overcome fear, if only for a moment. Meanwhile, the parents who had survived the initial assault were organizing emergency communication with nearby human fleets. Warnings were sent immediately, detailing the breach of the first rule and the status of the children. The realization struck them all at once: this was not a routine patrol. This was an attack designed to provoke a response, and it had succeeded in demonstrating the audacity of the Valtor Empire. Every parent, teacher, and child understood that their lives were now part of a larger story, one that would have consequences far beyond Vega Station. Adam finally found a secure area deep within the station, a maintenance bay that was largely forgotten. Children huddled together, shaking and crying, while Adam and Lily clung to each other, trying to offer comfort despite their own fear. It was a moment of terrifying quiet, a pause in the chaos as everyone realized that safety was temporary, fragile, and uncertain. Adam looked at the children and thought about the stories of human history, how the past had always warned of underestimating humans, how breaking the first rule was always a dangerous mistake. And now they were living that history in real time. The attack left scars, both visible and invisible. The physical damage to Vega Station was significant. Corridors were blasted open, consoles destroyed, and emergency systems damaged. But the emotional impact was far greater. Children who had played in safety now understood fear, betrayal, and vulnerability. Parents who had trusted centuries of peace realized that rules, no matter how sacred, could be broken. And across the galaxy, watchers knew that humanity had been provoked in a way that could no longer be ignored. By the time the first human reinforcements received the distress signals, the situation had stabilized enough to prevent total massacre, but the damage was done. One child was gravely injured, several others had minor wounds, and countless young minds were traumatized by the violation of a law that had always promised protection. Adam, exhausted and bruised, held Lily and looked at the chaos surrounding him. He understood something profoundly important. The first rule had not just been a law. It had been a shield, a promise, and now that shield was broken. Humanity would not forgive, and the galaxy would soon understand the cost of arrogance. In the aftermath, Vega Station became both a symbol of tragedy and a spark of awakening. Footage from the attack spread across systems, igniting outrage, fear, and anticipation. Aliens who had once whispered about the supposed weakness of humans now reconsidered their assumptions. Humans across the galaxy, from remote colonies to Earth itself, braced for a response that would be swift, calculated, and relentless. Adam Cole and his sister Lily survived, but their childhood innocence was forever altered. They had witnessed the breaking of the first rule, the consequences of arrogance, and the beginning of a human response that would shake the stars. That day, Vega Station learned a lesson that no history book could fully explain. When the first rule of the galaxy is broken, nothing remains ordinary. Childhood innocence collides with interstellar politics. Fear meets courage, and the smallest humans carry the weight of an entire civilization's wrath. Adam, Lily, and the other children had survived, but the galaxy would never forget what had happened. The Valtor soldiers had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would soon echo louder than any alarm, louder than any blaster shot, louder than the screams of Vega Station itself. The galaxy held its breath as the human fleets mobilized. News of the attack on Vega Station, of children being harmed despite the first rule, spread like wildfire. Every planet with human presence, every colony, every fleet station was alert, buzzing with tension and anticipation. For centuries, humans had maintained a quiet strength, a calm authority that relied on restraint and the fear it inspired. But the breaking of the first rule changed everything. There was no longer room for hesitation. Humanity would respond, and the galaxy would feel the weight of its wrath. Adam Cole and his sister Lily watched from the safety of a reinforced observation chamber deep inside Vega Station. The children, though still trembling, had been regrouped with others who survived the attack. Teachers and parents worked frantically, tending to injuries, comforting children, and trying to understand what had just happened. But even in the chaos, everyone knew the same unspoken truth. The Valtor soldiers had crossed a line that could never be forgiven. Adam stared at the stars outside the station's windows, seeing small dots of light in the distance, and his heart skipped a beat when he realized that those dots were approaching fleets of human warships, silently answering the call. The first human ship to arrive was the HSS Leviathan, a vessel so massive it seemed to blot out entire sections of space. Its hull reflected the faint light of nearby stars, and its presence alone sent a message. Humanity was awake, aware, and unyielding. Commander Mara Hayes, known across the stars as the Iron Widow of Earth, stood on the bridge, her gaze cold and calculating. She had received the distress signals from Vega Station hours earlier, and she had waited only long enough to prepare a response that would leave no doubt. The Valtor Empire, proud and arrogant, had underestimated humanity, and that mistake was about to cost them dearly. As the Leviathan entered orbit around Vega Station, the remaining Valtor soldiers froze. They had been trained to intimidate, to strike fear into civilizations that challenged their authority. But this was different. The massive human warship wasn't there to negotiate. It wasn't there to test or to provoke. It was there to deliver judgment. Mara Hayes opened a channel, her voice calm, deliberate, and carrying the weight of authority. "We gave you peace. You gave us blood. You attacked children. That was your first mistake." The words were simple, but in them lay centuries of power, patience, and now, wrath. The human fleet didn't begin with indiscriminate destruction. They had no need for it. Mara's strategy was precise, calculated, and terrifying. Every Valtor ship that had approached Vega Station was tracked, monitored, and neutralized with surgical accuracy. Weapons systems disabled enemy vessels without harming civilians. The humans moved through space like a silent storm, dismantling arrogance and fear with disciplined precision. What was happening was not war. It was a reminder, a demonstration of why the first rule had existed in the first place. Humanity's restraint made their power even more terrifying. On the station itself, the atmosphere shifted as the humans arrived. Children peered out from secure windows, wide-eyed at the massive Leviathan and the smaller ships accompanying it. Parents felt a mixture of awe and relief, knowing that their children were finally safe, though they also understood the danger had not passed entirely. The Valtor soldiers on the station, who had moments ago been in control, now realized the full scope of what they had provoked. Panic replaced arrogance. Orders from their commanders were drowned out by the strategic dismantling of their fleets above. Within moments, the attack force that had seemed invincible was reduced to disarray. Mara Hayes did not gloat. She moved through the fleet's communication channels, directing actions with precision, ensuring that no civilian life, human or alien, would be unnecessarily harmed. But the Valtor Empire had been given a choice: respect the first rule or suffer consequences. The choice had been made when the children had been attacked. Humanity's response was measured, terrifying in its clarity and unstoppable in its execution. Every move was a message. Harm a human child and you will face consequences that no amount of power or influence can counter. Back inside the station, Adam understood the gravity of the moment. He had seen fear, courage, and death in the corridors during the attack, but now he saw something else: the weight of human will. The Leviathan and the fleet were more than just machines. They were a living, breathing symbol of what happens when humanity is crossed. Children who had been terrified hours earlier now felt a strange mixture of hope and awe. Lily held Adam's hand tightly, her eyes reflecting both fear and wonder as the massive fleet moved with precision in the starfield outside. The battle for Vega Station's skies was over quickly. Valtor forces were either captured, disabled, or forced to retreat under the relentless efficiency of human strategy. It was swift, almost surgical, leaving no room for further mistakes. The lesson had been made clear. Humans did not negotiate when their children were harmed. The galaxy had always known that humans were dangerous when provoked, but seeing it in action, watching an entire fleet neutralize aggression without destroying innocent life, left even veteran officers speechless. It was a demonstration of calculated power that would be remembered for generations. But Mara Hayes did not stop at Vega Station. The attack was more than a local incident. It was a violation of a sacred law that protected all human children, everywhere. Orders were sent throughout human fleets to prepare for further missions if necessary, to ensure that no other station, colony, or settlement would face the same fate. Every child in human-controlled space became a symbol, a reminder that the first rule was not optional. Even distant systems felt the ripple of Vega Station's tragedy. The galaxy began to understand that humanity's response was not revenge in the petty sense. It was enforcement of a universal truth. In the aftermath, the Valtor Empire reeled. Ships were destroyed or captured, and news of the attack and humanity's response spread faster than any military report could travel. Alien races who had doubted the strength of humans now reconsidered. The arrogance that had led to the attack was met with humility, fear, and respect. Humans had proven that their reach, their strategic genius, and their moral resolve were not to be challenged. And Vega Station, though scarred, stood as a testament to resilience, to courage, and to the unwavering power of the first rule. Adam watched the Valtor soldiers being escorted away. Some of them avoided eye contact, ashamed and afraid. Others stared, defiant but broken, realizing that they had underestimated humans in the gravest way possible. Adam thought of the children who had been harmed, the chaos, the fear, and the courage. He thought of his sister, and the countless others who had survived through bravery and quick thinking. That day, he realized that humanity's strength was not just in weapons or fleets, but in the willingness to protect innocence at any cost. As calm began to return to Vega Station, Mara Hayes communicated directly with the council chambers. She delivered a simple but powerful message. The first rule had been violated, but justice had been served. The message was both a warning and a lesson. Never again should anyone doubt the cost of breaking humanity's sacred laws. Across the galaxy, the lesson spread. Stories of the Leviathan and its fleet, of the rescue of Vega Station's children, and of Commander Hayes's calculated enforcement, became legend. The first rule of the galaxy was no longer just a rule. It was a fact of life, enforced with certainty and visible for all to see. In the quiet that followed the battle, Adam and Lily stood on the observation deck, watching the human fleet depart. Children played again, cautiously, while teachers and parents assessed the damage and comforted the frightened. But even as life returned to some semblance of normalcy, the impact of the attack and humanity's response remained etched in every mind. Vega Station had survived, but the galaxy had been reminded of a simple, terrifying truth. Harm a human child and the consequences will reach farther and hit harder than anyone could imagine. Adam looked at Lily and whispered, almost to himself. They'll never forget this. And maybe they'll never try it again. Lily nodded, still holding his hand, her small face set with determination even in her fear. Humanity had acted, justice had been enforced, and the galaxy had learned that the first rule was not just a law, it was a force. And breaking it was the gravest mistake any species could make. From that day forward, no one would ever underestimate human children again, nor the humans who protected them. This part focuses on human retaliation, shows the strategic brilliance of the humans, emphasizes the awe and fear felt by the galaxy, and sets up the final resolution and new law in Part 5. The aftermath of the Vega Station incident settled over the galaxy like a heavy, electric silence. Ships returned to orbit, repair crews and emergency teams worked tirelessly, and families reunited wherever they could. Children who had once played freely in zero-gravity parks now held their parents' hands tightly, their laughter subdued, replaced with cautious smiles. But the story of what had happened, the attack on human children and the swift, overwhelming response was already spreading across star systems faster than any official report. The galaxy was listening, learning, and forever changed. On Vega Station, Adam Cole and his sister Lily were at the center of the recovery efforts. Though they were only children, they had seen the worst the galaxy could offer and survived. Teachers, parents, and alien allies worked around them to repair the physical and emotional damage. But Adam and Lily carried a new understanding. Innocence alone could not shield them, but courage, unity, and the unwavering strength of humanity could. Adam looked at the sky where the departing human fleet glimmered like silver threads and realized the full weight of what had occurred. The first rule, the rule that had been broken so brutally, had been restored by action, but not without leaving marks on every witness. Commander Mara Hayes and her fleet did not linger unnecessarily. Their mission had been precise: enforce justice, send a message, and withdraw. The Leviathan and its accompanying ships moved like ghosts across the stars, their presence a reminder that human retaliation was swift, calculated, and merciless when provoked. The Valtor Empire, humiliated and dismantled in the immediate aftermath, was forced to acknowledge its mistake. Humble apologies were broadcast across the galaxy, but it was clear to everyone that no formal words could erase the consequences of the actions taken against human children. Respect, fear, and careful obedience had replaced arrogance and defiance. Within the Galactic Council, shockwaves of accountability reverberated. Delegates who had once whispered about bending rules or testing humans now sat in stunned silence. The attack on Vega Station had forced the Council to confront a painful truth. Humanity was not a threat to be negotiated with lightly, and the first rule existed for a reason beyond fear or diplomacy. For centuries, species had treated human children as untouchable, more out of caution than morality. Now they understood why. Humanity had demonstrated that harm to their children would not be met with negotiation, discussion, or hesitation. It would be met with decisive, calculated consequences that no one could withstand. Back on Vega Station, Adam and Lily helped the younger children recover from the trauma. Parents whispered reassurances, explaining that the humans who had arrived to help were not there to punish but to protect. The children began to laugh again, slowly, hesitantly, finding comfort in the familiar routines of the station, lessons, games, and simple daily life. Yet even as joy returned, a sense of vigilance remained. Children had seen fear and courage intertwined, had watched bravery in action, and understood that the galaxy was both beautiful and dangerous. For Adam, it was a lesson in responsibility. For Lily, it was a lesson in courage. The human response became legend. Across the stars, stories spread of the Leviathan and its precise intervention, of Commander Mara Hayes' command, and of the young heroes who survived the attack. These accounts were not exaggerated. They became teaching tools for both humans and aliens, examples of what happened when arrogance collided with innocence, and what happens when rules designed to protect life are violated. The story of Vega Station transformed from a tragedy into a powerful lesson. A rule broken is a lesson learned, but a lesson enforced with wisdom can reshape civilizations. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Council issued a new decree, one more binding and far-reaching than any before. The first rule of the galaxy was no longer just a guideline or a precaution. It became a universal law, No harm shall ever befall a child of any race under any circumstances. Every species ratified it, understanding that humanity's response had proven the stakes were real. Children everywhere, not just human ones, were now protected with a level of enforcement that had never existed before. This new law symbolized unity, caution, and respect across civilizations, and it bore the unmistakable mark of human resolve. Adam and Lily returned to school slowly, still shaken but stronger for the experience. Teachers encouraged the children to speak about what had happened, to share their feelings, and to ask questions. The lessons were not just about science or engineering anymore. They were about morality, responsibility, and courage. Adam found himself explaining to younger students how teamwork and quick thinking had saved lives. Lily, shy but determined, reminded her friends that fear could be faced and courage could flourish, even in the smallest of beings. Together, they helped others understand the weight of what they had endured and how humanity had turned tragedy into a lesson for the galaxy. Even the Valtor survivors learned from the incident. They were forced to rebuild, rethink, and reconsider their place in the galaxy. Humility replaced pride, and caution replaced arrogance. The incident at Vega Station became a turning point, not just for humans, but for the entire interstellar community. The story of the attack, the human retaliation, and the new universal law was passed down through generations, taught in schools, council chambers, and military academies. It became legend, then history, and then a moral compass for the galaxy. For Adam and Lily, life continued, but it was forever changed. They were no longer simply children playing in a floating city. They were survivors, witnesses to history, and symbols of the innocence humanity would protect at any cost. Every time they looked at the stars, they remembered the chaos, the courage, and the overwhelming power that humanity could summon when provoked. Their understanding of the galaxy had matured in ways that no ordinary lesson could have provided. They carried with them not only trauma but resilience, empathy, and the knowledge that life, even at its most fragile, could inspire extraordinary strength. The families of Vega Station gradually returned to normal routines, yet every parent and teacher understood that a new era had begun. The galaxy would never again take human children lightly. Parents spoke quietly among themselves about vigilance, responsibility, and hope, while children learned to balance curiosity with caution. The station itself, though scarred by the attack, became a symbol of survival and triumph. It stood as a reminder that peace is precious, innocence is sacred, and justice, when executed with wisdom and precision, could reshape the universe. Over time, the story of Vega Station became a central teaching point in human and alien societies alike. It was taught as a historical event, a moral lesson, and a cautionary tale. Never harm children was no longer an abstract idea but a lived, demonstrated truth. Generations would grow up knowing that even the smallest humans, and the humans as a civilization, would respond to injustice in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. The legend of the Leviathan, of Commander Mara Hayes, and of the children who survived became a beacon, inspiring courage, unity, and responsibility across the stars. Adam and Lily, though still young, carried forward the legacy of that day. They shared their experiences with other children, emphasizing the importance of bravery, trust, and standing together in the face of danger. Their story became a reminder that rules, when enforced with wisdom and strength, could protect life and maintain peace. The first rule of the galaxy, once broken, had been restored not just by fear, but by deliberate, precise, and just action. Humanity had demonstrated its power and its values, teaching the galaxy that innocence, especially that of children, would never be taken lightly. As peace settled over Vega Station and the galaxy at large, Adam looked out at the stars one last time, holding Lily's hand. They had survived chaos, witnessed courage, and learned the value of protection, justice, and responsibility. The first rule of the galaxy had been broken, but it had emerged stronger, reinforced by humanity's decisive response. The galaxy would remember Vega Station, the children, and the lesson forever. Innocence is sacred, and those who harm it will face consequences beyond imagination. Humanity had ensured that no one would ever forget.